And before I start, I do have to say a quick thank you to someone though, because I got sent some stuff. I know we were talking about product just off camera, but I got sent this thing from a company called Nolii, and
Yes.
it's like a charger that kind of hooks into the back of your phone. So cheers for that. I don't really get sent much stuff, so I may as well plug the product. So if anyone else wants to send me something, I will plug it to death. But I'll do some sort of fancy intro when you guys aren't here. But just to kind of pass you over. So we're joined by Troy and Nathan over at Katapult. For those that don't know who Katapult are, and we've got a few UK listeners and they might not know who Katapult are, who are Katapult? What do you do, and how does it perhaps compare to some of the stuff we've got over here in the UK?
Well, thanks, Brad. Really nice to chat to you and your listeners. Katapult Design is an Australian-based product design and development consultancy. We're a bunch of industrial designers and product engineers based in Byron Bay, which many people will know, in northern New South Wales. We've got a studio in Sydney and a studio in Melbourne as well. So we're up the east coast of the country. We work in a wide range of markets, everything from high-tech electronic, medical, ruggedized products like mining equipment, hardware, gardening products, things like that. We do quite a bit of UI, UX work, work in consumer products as well, furniture, sporting goods, you name it. So we're across a lot of areas for companies, ranging from, small entrepreneurs and inventors right through to major brands and everything in between.
Good stuff. And if you are going to research Katapult, make sure you put a K and not a C. Otherwise, you just get some really random stuff that comes up on your Google. I may as well introduce you to Paul as well. So usually, guys, we usually do this with a chap called Drew, but Drew on a Wednesday morning is working. He's just got a new job, so I've subbed Drew out, and Paul's come in to take his spot. So unfortunately, our listeners are now. We've gone from one recruiter to two, so I do feel for them. To be honest, Paul.
We don't mention the recruitment word during the podcast,
Yeah. So thanks for joining, Paul, as well. So the first thing is, when you mentioned 3 studios there, that tells me that you guys must be used to remote working in some sort of shape or form. So lockdown must have been a breeze for you guys.
Look, we are used to remote working for the fact that we've got the 3 studios, but we've also got about 30% of our work comes from overseas, and quite a lot of it's spread around Australia as well. So it's a big country. We do travel a lot under normal circumstances, but we're very used to remote working. It's really ramped up at the moment because our Melbourne team in particular have gone back into lockdown, as your listeners probably are aware of. And so they're all working from home at the moment. So that's particularly hard. And we're putting in a few things to try and help out. But yeah, it's for us, it's been a pretty easy transition. I don't know what you think, Troy. You're probably one of the more isolated ones at the moment.
Yeah. Oh, look, I think it's good. There is some of the guys, like you're saying, the Melbourne office have had to transition to full digital interfaces, so there's not that face-to-face contact. But it's from a client-facing side, it has been interesting because you don't have that in the room dynamic with them, and so especially from the front end of the strategy or the conceptual side, you can't sit there and sketch in front of them or ideate or riff off with them as well. So it's been an interesting learning curve just to keep a dynamic in the room or on a Zoom call. So, you can try to read what they're thinking and make sure they're happy or they're getting their ideas across or you're actually solving the right problems. So it's been a bit of a learning curve there.
Yeah. So in terms of the remote thing then, what has been working well for you guys? Because I'm sure other companies are particularly they might be struggling with the whole transition of it, whether it be a cultural transition or just general tools. How have you? Is it Miro? I can never remember it. That tends to be a popular one. Miro. I think it's like a whiteboard tool.
We do a lot of stuff on Slack.
Okay.
So, our team communications at the moment are largely done on Slack, which has a sketching tool over the top.
Okay.
So, for example, the guys might have a CAD file up on screen, and then one of us will be scribbling over the top and highlighting things. So we do that a lot. Troy obviously is doing a lot of sketching and very old school, holding the sketch up to the camera and going, what do you think of this? And what about this? Or shining the camera on his Wacom as he's sketching. So it really does vary.
It does, but that brings up a good point, Nathan. A lot of the guys do have digital displays or Wacoms. And so we can, you can share screen and sketch straight onto the screen. And that's quite, for one of the medical clients we're working with, it's quite a good iterative process. And that way that I can almost contextualize or communicate their ideas as the meeting's going. It's almost like, I'm doodling on a page and they're sort of saying, oh no, what about this? And so we can, it's a little bit more fluid than us trying to just communicate with our hands what we're thinking. So
yeah. Do you use these tools with clients as well, or is it just internally?
Not some clients, yes, definitely. And I think that comes back a little bit to that education process. Once we feel confident with them and we're quite intimate with them, in a very working sense, that we can, we do put a lot of those tools in place. And one of the things that I think we do really well is we act like the client's in-house design team. And so we like to not go and sort of step away for 3 weeks and do a lot of work and then come back and say, what do you think of these ideas? What we try to do is workshop with them and work them almost daily or bi-daily and showing them the process and getting them really actively involved. And so by using those sketch tools or those online share screen tools, it's great because they feel like they're a part of the process as well.
Do you remember, Paul, when you went to see, I don't know if it was Mr. Priestman or Mr. Powell, but remember when he started doodling a bike to you during a...
Yeah, it was. I kind of took it as a compliment because we were fully engaged. This was with Tim or Powell. We were fully engaged in the conversation. He was just sitting across his desk, and then we were chatting away. And he had a pad in front of him. He was doodling and really answering the questions and very interactive. And then after the meeting, I just had a glance on his notepad, and there he had sketched this fantastic 3D custom motorcycle, and I was so impressed. I almost asked him to sign it and for me to take it away. But yeah, it was very interesting. This ability, as Troy says, to get your ideas down and to sketch them is good. But one thing that I found from talking to a lot of clients is that this sort of remote working, it seems to be, I'm going to say it, the new norm. And for, I think, mature designers like Troy and Nathan, you've got within your team, it works really well. But I'm hearing now that the people that are going to suffer from this remote working is those young graduates or those people coming into the workplace for the very first time who really do absorb everything from working side by side and being mentored on designs and ideas and just getting the buzz from working in an office environment. The idea of joining a great consultancy but being told, well, you're going to have to carry on working in your bedroom is sometimes going to be a bit of a challenge for young designers coming into the industry. I don't know what your comments or views are on that.
Oh, I think you're 100% right. That's a very niche and difficult problem right now. We're actually employing a couple of staff at the moment, and they're experienced, but even onboarding experienced people is challenging in this time because they're meeting new teams and they've got to hit the ground running without that sort of physical support. So I think it's challenging. We've done things that I'm sure everyone's doing, and that is having team get-togethers online. We have typically a Friday night after work at about 5 o'clock, we down tools and have a beer together and just talk about joke around and find out what everyone's doing. Most of the Melbourne team are just staying at home all weekend at the moment, so it's a pretty short conversation. But it's, you just try and make an effort like that. I think with young designers, we'd really try and pair them up with a mentor and have someone work perhaps extra closely with them in the short term. And then hopefully, the situation will change for us in the coming month or two, and we can ease into a normal working environment.
And what do you think generally about the disciplines? Again, talking to a big in-house team here, it was Breville, and he was saying that they've seen some differences in their remote working, that the mechanical design engineers are given a task, and it's a very engineering task. It's tolerancing, it's injection mold fit, and they're able to take that task away and look at it, analyze it, and come back with a solution. But the guy that was heading up the industrial design team was saying that his team thrive on this interaction. So in one company, the model of industrial designers and the model of mechanical design engineers, just the culture doesn't fit comfortably with working remotely. It's working, but the preferences for the industrial designers all to be in and mixing together.
Yeah, I couldn't be more of an advocate for actually sitting in a room with people and sketching and workshopping. And that's something that we've found really difficult, because not only is the ability to leapfrog and sort of iterate really quickly, but I think it also, just getting together multiple experiences, multiple different life experiences, I think it adds a depth to the design work you're doing as well. And we're finding it really difficult to do that, because you could be, sketching, or the other person could be looking up research or making a mock-up, and you're all there together. And the churn that you're getting through is so much more efficient than you would if you were isolated or in silos. And so it's one of the problems we're having when we're actually onboarding some new staff, especially younger staff, is getting them to communicate digitally like we would be if you were all sitting around in a table. Like, how do you create that atmosphere that, gets everybody excited and like, oh, what about this idea? What about that? And, before, in a couple of hours, you've got so much more ideation and you're able to spin, as opposed to one person sitting there staring at an A3 piece of paper for an hour.
Yeah. Even with what we were doing today, Troy, where we're assessing a prototype for a project, and it's a face-worn device, and we're trying to get across to, we had the prototype here in our Byron studio, and we were trying to get across to the rest of the team some of the issues with it, and taking photos and showing video and then holding it up and sort of talking about it. But people couldn't feel it. They couldn't put it on, so you do have those restraints that we're having to deal with. Look, I would say in the most cases, clients and staff are pretty understanding. We were in a meeting about a month ago, and with our technical director, and his young son marched in the middle of the meeting, opens the door in the nude. Dad, dinner's ready, and the client just laughed it off. And in years gone by, that would have been really frowned upon, but everyone's sort of cutting each other a bit of slack at the moment too, I think, which is great.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that I'm taking from it so far. I think the first thing is that it is tougher on juniors, but it's also little things about, I'm trying to, if I relate it to the job that we do, Paul, but it's things like hearing someone interact with a client for the first time and how they go about, just little things like that. How would Paul deal with a client if a problem, you don't really get that over Zoom. So it's those kind of more commercial bits as well, I think, which you don't really get over Zoom.
See, the whole subtleties of body language too, Brad, I reckon that's a thing that we deal with a lot, because a lot of the time we're having quite robust discussions with clients and staff, and being able to gauge body language and understand how far to back off and all of those things, you've got to try and work out slightly differently.
I think you're right. I think I read somewhere that I think it's 80% of communication is non-verbal. So that interaction face to face goes a long way. So yeah, whenever, before the sort of COVID lockdown, if a client always used to say, well, look, let me just have a first round telephone interview with them, we would sort of prefer, if they were just the other side of town, we would just prefer that they met face to face, even if it was outside office hours. because that initial meeting and the body language and the way they come over absolutely works far better than just a single phone call. Zoom and media go some way to fix that gap, but on the whole, I think a face-to-face meeting in the good old days was definitely the way that we would go forward.
See, and Paul, to your point as well, some of our larger clients in these Zoom calls, there would be a marketing manager, a head of engineering or production, and there would be the CEO and then the design guys. And so a lot of the time when we're face to face, I would be listening to Nathan talk about a certain aspect and I'd be reading the room, and you'd sort of be saying, oh, well, is engineering involved? Is procurement, are they listening, or are they looking at their iPhone? And so you can start to tailor that conversation and sort of, I guess, try to meet everybody's need in the meeting, where it's a lot more difficult to have a quite informal design presentation. For me to sort of leapfrog off what Nate's saying or what the other designers are saying, it's a little bit more staggered, and you miss that fluidity of conversation, I guess, when you're on these programs.
Yeah, I think
it sounds tougher.
The second thing as well is that I've started to see expectations of, I don't like saying the word candidate, I think they're just people. So the expectations of people are starting to change. So I want to work 2 days here and then I want to work 3 days here. And I think it's going to become a real challenge for businesses over the next, maybe more so over the next 6 to 12 months, I'm not sure. But just there is this kind of natural expectation kind of leaning in where you can just work remotely. And but I think it's a little bit of like an arrogance that comes with it. They just think that they could just work from one end of the country and then have the office at the other end. I'm finding that within hardware that we guys do, that the studio is the central point. So you can't be living in Melbourne and then have the jobs up in Cairns somewhere. It's just not going to happen. You're going to need to be within arm's reach of that studio at any given time. That's just my view on it anyway.
I can speak both as an employer and as a designer, and I think there is a flip side to that, Brad, and that is that yes, working from home is pretty convenient at times, but having done both, you get pretty isolated at home. And there is a time when you really crave being around your teammates and having that collaboration and that banter. And I think there's no doubt that there'll be a mix going forward, depending on the situation and the type of work people are doing. But there'll always be a place for that coming together and the studio environment. That's hard to replace, I don't think.
Yeah, how was it for you, Paul? Because you was in our little office, and then although you've got a lovely home, you are on your own.
Very much so. I went from a big office environment with 25 people to over here on the North Shore, on the northern beaches, and working from an office from home. And it works well, but you do crave that interaction with other people. So we will go into our office in the city maybe once or twice a week. That's picking up a little bit now, purely to have that interaction within that sort of collateral sort of working environment. We use Regis Office, but I also go to WeWorks, and they're really good. And again, I'm just wondering whether moving forward, some of these large companies will say, look, we don't need to have all this office space, but we do need to get together as a group. So maybe some of these more sort of shared office spaces, like WeWorks and Regis, will have more companies using them 2 or 3 days a week.
As if they don't go bust. We spoke about this off camera, I think it was last week or something, Nathan. You was talking about not necessarily a challenge, but maybe it'd be a frustration. I don't quite know what the word is, but all around the kind of the ROI where it comes to design. So that kind of, and I don't know if that's been more of a challenge over this lockdown period in terms of, particularly if you're not face to face in front of someone. How has that been in terms of getting that return, making sure clients feel there is that return of investment in design right now?
Yeah, look, Troy and I are always wrestling with this sort of stuff in doing our business development. And look, we believe really passionately that design can translate to the bottom line for a business. So a design-led approach is really valuable commercially, not just for the sake of it, and that design is an investment in success rather than a cost of production. That's really our key thing. Now, selling that message, as Troy said, building a lot of that comes from building a rapport with executives and key decision makers at clients, especially if they're a new client. And so those face-to-face meetings are invaluable for building that rapport and gaining trust. And we work very hard at that, and also sort of explaining our process and why you would do it and talking about our success stories and so on. So that's definitely harder now. What we've found over the last few months is that we've got existing clients coming back for new projects. So that process is a bit easier, to be honest, Brad, because we're dealing with people that we've dealt with before. They know us, they know our process, we know them, and we can have these really honest discussions. So far that's been pretty good. It's the new clients that's a little bit challenging.
Yeah. So you just have to look at somewhere like Logitech, don't you, as a prime example of designs at a board level, and you know that it's just the commercials of that business has just kind of gone through the roof. So,
and it's quite interesting in our environment in Australia, where there's a lot more smaller companies. There are a lot frugal. Not frugal is not the right word, but they're less willing to invest money into design or into innovation, and so a lot of the time we start with quite small projects and, you know, working quite intimately with them, and then they start seeing the value of design and what it can do. And so we would look at their initial problem, but then open up, well, looking at your key audiences, what have you thought about this, or what about this, or, you know, should you be looking at it in this lens? And, you know, once we build that really good rapport, then it opens up quite large projects. And then, you know, we came in on one project where we were doing a mine detection unit, and it was quite a small thing of work. Now we're on to our 6th metal detector. So, you know, and it's design in that company is at a C level. Like, we go in there and do workshops with them, and you know, watching people do the physical interactions, as opposed to just going in there and saying, can you solve this little problem? And so, you know, they're starting to really see the value of design across all levels. So it's really exciting.
I think it's a little bit about selling also the idea that what's the risk if you don't put in this effort, because your competitors are going to be putting in that effort. And, you know, there's a lot of our clients are obviously working against pretty tightly held competitors in their fields. And we're identifying what competitors are doing or what aligned companies are doing in other areas, and saying you've got to be doing those same things. So there's a sort of aspirational and competitive nature to some of it as well.
That's fair. Do most of your clients have an internal design team as well, so they have that already structured in it, or do you actually sit as the design team almost?
It varies.
Yeah.
Some have internal design resources, some have internal engineering or electronics resources, and we dovetail in. Others don't have anything. So we'll work for entrepreneurs that are in completely different field. They come out of finance or, you know, some other area, and we'll do everything for them. So it really depends. We're quite flexible in that sense, and have to be in the Australian market. When we've got to be able to bounce around.
When we spoke to design partners, which is probably one of the favourite ones we did actually, it was kind of similar to this. We just kind of spent an hour with them and we just kind of chatted. They were talking about, for them, a good client for them is just something where it's beyond that transactional value. And is that something that you find sometimes can be a bit of a challenge, where it's just that transactional, we just want you to do this bit of work, then you know, please go away. Do you find that as a real challenge sometimes?
Look, 100%. And what I think, but the thing that brings personally the greatest joy for me is when it moves past that, And you go into another meeting and they're actually saying the same things that you were talking about. They're actually looking less about fixing that problem and more about creating a really innovative experience. So even the language that they're using is changing. And that's when you know that they're starting to think differently. And it's less about, getting a designer in to put a fillet on that or to make this bracket. And they're like, well, should it be a bracket at all? What's actually going on? And so, that's the stuff that really excites me at a system design level as well. And so thinking strategy at the system architecture of the company. And often we go in and we talk about that and I guess, travel that path with the client. And then that opens up more opportunities as well. And not just physical products, like what are all the touch points that they're sort of working with. And so
on that point, do you find that sometimes when you're in meetings, you kind of have to sow a seed and then at the next meeting, they've picked up on it and all of a sudden that was a great idea that they had, although you had planted a few seeds on the way. And again, coming back to one of the other podcasts.
Careful what you say here, Troy.
there was a very good point, and it was just a one-liner. They were saying that some of their clients, they have to take more of a lead, and their ego comes through because nobody's taking direction of the project. But other clients, they have to show empathy, and they have to slowly feed the client and get that mixture. And it depends on who you're talking to, whether you're going in with your ego saying, well, we've got the capability and we know what the focus is, or over empathy, okay, this could be an idea. How does it fit with you? Do you kind of go between sort of good cop, bad cop?
Nathan and I joke about this all the time because you're exactly right. And in a lot of meetings, it's not necessarily about the product that we're designing or that interaction. It's about that person and understanding how to deal with that person exactly. And are they wanting you to take charge and sort of really, or is it something that they want to be involved in the process? And so without bruising their ego and understanding, what their personality traits are and how you can lift them up through the process, because if they're enjoying the process and they're happy and they're involved and engaged, then you're going to get a better result as well. So that's 100%. And a lot of what we try to do is relationship based.
I think that's critical too, Troy. Your point about if they're enjoying it, and look, no matter what the dynamics are between people, our goal is to get an amazing result for the client. That's what we want to do. And so some clients are easier to deal with than others, and we realize that, but we work as a team. We'll all of our guys will go into meetings and there'll be different personalities, and people identify with who they can speak to on a. We understand that in some cases, some CEOs want to thump the desk and make a decision, and others are looking for collaboration. So you've got to be nimble. That's part of being a designer
But what if they want it? But what if they want it in silver, Nathan?
Well, we've got a reputation for pushing back, Brad. So okay. We do. We use the word robust. We do have pretty robust discussions at times. I mean, look, we're pragmatic too, so you can't be a prima donna in this, but we do try and present logic. The guys are even working on some stuff today to present to a client about some strategic sort of work, and really just trying to step through what they were thinking, what we're thinking, and trying to come to a good outcome. So it's planning as well.
And just on that point, how do you cope with startups and people that have got what they think is a great idea but don't know how to sort of commercialize it? Do you have those sort of robust conversations where you point them in the direction that they need to go and get some funding, or that this really isn't a good idea? Do you turn many sort of startup entrepreneurs away, or?
Look, we're starting to be a little bit more selective as our business grows. Yeah. So Katapult's been around for about 12 years, and in the beginning, we'd do anything and take anything, and now, because we have that sort of history and a certain size team and capability, we can knock back work that we're not interested in or passionate about. So to what you were saying before about choosing projects that have a bit of meaning, we try and do that. To talk more particularly about entrepreneurs and startups, you can pretty quickly understand whether they know what they're talking about or not, whether they've done their homework or they've just come up with an idea in the shower and they've come, we've had people turn up with a sketch on the back of an envelope and go, oh, this is the greatest thing ever, and nobody's done it. And within 5 minutes, we've found 6 different companies or people that are doing the same product elsewhere in the world. So I think the thing with entrepreneurs, particularly if they're inexperienced in product development, is trying to walk them through the process, Paul, and making sure that they understand that actually there is a series of phases, there's a series of stage gates, and what they're about to take on is a wild ride, and it's not a cheap exercise. And you can't just spend $5,000 and put something on Kickstarter and make $10 million. It's just not going to happen. So there has to be, we're doing a process of education as well as design. And so we're mentoring and we're talking to them and we're introducing them to IP lawyers. We're talking to them about branding often. We're showing, getting them to meet with videographers to publicize their idea at certain times, marketers. It's so broad and so complex that the process is never the same for two different.
Is it because it's such a small world in Australia? Do you kind of have to offer that kind of value add, because you never know, they may know a friend who has got a bit more sense, and therefore it may come back to you. Whereas in the UK, you might, or in the US, you might just be able to just kind of bog it off because it's a waste of your time. But because it's such a small world over there, you kind of have to introduce to the IP and whatnot, because you just don't know where that relationship may go 6 months, 12 months, 2 years later down the line.
There's definitely that aspect to it, Brad. Yeah. But there's also, it's a philosophy that we have that we're, as I mentioned before, we're just trying to get the best result. So we're confident in where we sit in the process, and we're confident if we do a good job that the clients will come back. So we're quite happy to introduce them to people that can do things that we can't. We don't say we can do everything, but what we can do, or we're confident of, is that we know people that can do nearly everything. So we'll have, we had a client, actually a past client, come to us with a new project about 2 weeks ago. And the first thing we did was go and ring our networks and find a particular very technical supplier that could manufacture this product. And the client wasn't able to do that by themselves. But we had a communication going, and there's no payment been exchanged, but there's a relationship set up now, and there'll be a project out of it. So it's those sort of things that work well out here in the colonies, Yeah.
Yeah. We must have given a lot of stuff away for free, Paul, I'd imagine, in the past. Go and talk to that agency down the road. They work with X company that's quite similar, or go and talk to this guy or whatever. We must do things like that all the time. I try to think what we've given away in the past.
But it is interesting, Nathan. You talk about this sort of working very closely with startups or people that have got great ideas. I remember years ago, just outside London, Design Works, which I think they've got an office in Brisbane, but Design Works would have almost like an open mic night, and it was people could come along, graduates, entrepreneurs could come along and have a 5-minute pitch, where they would sit there, they would talk about an idea, show some sketches and some ideas. And Design Works window, if they couldn't help them directly, they would certainly give them their thoughts and point them in the right direction, just to kind of inspire these young designers to think about it in a different way, or even to start working with them. But it was I think they used to do it once or twice a year, just for, I think they used to put a day aside and just have this beauty parade of entrepreneurs and startups and young graduates coming in with a great idea, and it worked. It seemed to sort of put a little bit more injection into the industry, and was received well.
What's quite interesting about what you're saying there, Paul, is a lot of the time, some of the time, I should say, when we are dealing with startup or entrepreneurs, it's it's not even about, I guess we don't even get to that education stage, but it's also about very tactfully working through what is the problem they're trying to solve. And because sometimes if people are very wedded to their ideas and they think that they've solved a so-called problem or they've got a great product, sometimes it's working with them to understand, all right, what are they actually doing and what is the problem you're solving, and getting them to step back out of their bubble and think a little bit more holistically about it. And, you know, maybe they do go away and think about it for another year, and then generally they'll sort of come back. But, you know, we just want to, I guess, ultimately get the best product, but also, you know, try to help people and try to steer people and show the value of design. And so if it's just a conversation over a coffee to sort of say, oh, look, you know, is this the way you should be going about it? Or, you know, not to be rude about it, but because they've got a really beautiful insight and they've targeted something that's not being done or that's not being done correctly. And so
it's often coming out of a personal expertise in some way, isn't it? So yeah, it's also, they do have a tendency to fall in love with their own idea, and often you can improve on their idea or pivot it a little bit and create a better commercial opportunity for them. If
any, when I do put this up, there'll be some keen listeners and they'll look at Nathan's desks and it's just full of wonderful stuff behind it. But one of them is an award there I can see. And I'm interested. I've always found this topic quite fascinating because we have them in our line of work, Paul, but we've never really, like signed up for anything like that. We've always kind of shied away from things like that. But just, I'd love to know, as a bit of an outsider more so than anything, in terms of awards, what do they actually mean for the business? I think we spoke about this before, and it wasn't necessarily that the actual, it increases our revenue, but it's that kind of, the team just love the fact that we've. But I'm interested to know, do awards win your business? I suppose that's the key question.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm a believer that it does. I don't think it has an absolute. It's not the absolute reason why someone will come to us, but a track record of winning awards and the publicity that goes with that, and the ability to show off those projects definitely has a commercial impact. People see we've won awards, we've done world-class design, and they come to us with confidence. So that's one aspect of it. Again, with my business hat or my business owner's hat on, I see that our team gets great enjoyment out of it and satisfaction and pride out of winning these awards. You know, we often associate the awards nights with a get together because we're spread out over 3 studios, and the combination of having a few drinks, celebrating, winning awards, the client's excited, we're excited. It's just a good feeling. And you know, I challenge, a lot of people are cynical about them, but I think it's really worthwhile. I just think it shows a track record, and it gives our team that sort of value for the hard work that they put in over time.
Well, just to add to that, Nathan, what's also quite good is that when we enter international design awards like the Red Dots and the IDEA Awards and so forth, when we win them, it shows that, you know, we're not just playing in our little pond over here in Australia. Like, the design we're actually doing is on par with the big boys. So it's fantastic validation in the sense that we're, you know, that we're doing the right thing, and that we are, you know, we're playing on an international level and not just, you know, sometimes you can, you know, you play in your own bubble, and almost like sometimes what our clients do, they stay in their own hemisphere and don't look outside of that. And so we don't want to be seen to be doing that either. We want to make sure that we're, you know, on a level that is equal with other design firms in other parts of the world.
So it brings you more international work, would you say, as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. It does indeed.
I also think it's the type of product that you've got the award for. You know, your flight board, you know, won the Red Dot Best of Best. Now that's a very sexy product, and it's out in the public eye. You know, it's not a medical device that only a surgeon or, unfortunately, a patient's going to have interaction with. You know, flight boards. I do a lot of sailing in the pit water, and wow, sometimes we have to chicane our way through the guys on flight boards. They're everywhere, and they're cool designs, and they really sort of certainly done very, very well. So again, I think it's that exposure to the product that you brought to market. But yeah, the flight board was a really good. That got a lot of press, and it's certainly out there.
What exactly is Flightboard? Sorry, Nathan. What exactly is Flightboard to those?
Oh yeah, because we've got to mention that back in the UK we don't have warm water, so you don't have many people.
Well, Flightboard is sort of every person's dream of a project. Really, it's a client based, an entrepreneur based in Byron Bay, who's developed what's called an e-foil, or an electric powered hydrofoil surfboard. So if you can imagine a surfboard with a battery inside it and about a metre long mast and wings down the bottom of that mast with an electric motor and a propeller at the bottom of the mast in a fuselage, and a remote control handset, a bit like an electric skateboard. Okay. And you stand on this surfboard and propel yourself along at up to 40-45 kilometers an hour. And as you reach what they call foiling speed, the lift in the wings on the foil actually lift the board out of the water. So you're riding the board, 600 to 800 mil off the surface of the water, almost silently, zooming along with no friction, and it's quite an incredible experience. So for us to be involved deeply in the design has been amazing, and the client's such a collaborative client. They've got a great team of people, and David, who leads the company, is a really insightful, kind of inspirational sort of person who's just tireless with the way that he works and thinks, and his passion for the product. So what Troy was saying before about building up that rapport and being embedded in a client's organization, that's a classic example of where we've worked really hard to be part of their team and develop a product that's fantastic and globally relevant. And the design awards in that sense are super relevant for the client, because they get publicity in those markets that they're selling into.
And you're kind of following that as they grow, then your relationship with them grows. So you want them to do well, because then naturally that may trickle down to some work with you guys.
Well, Nathan and Troy, just a question. How did the prototyping go? Did all your design team turn up in the morning with wetsuits on and they were down on the beach trying this thing out? How did the sort of evolution of the product go? Yeah,
there's been plenty of that. Both Flightboard's team doing testing and our team doing testing. We've had a number of on-water crashes and all sorts of interesting stuff happen, and different parts. And I know David started with an Aldi 3D printer and he designed a propeller himself, and built the first unit himself completely. And then we came along and helped refine it and develop it. And so that process has been very iterative. There's been some pretty crazy prototyping happenings and testing of equipment and trialing things in test rigs, and it's quite amazing what's happened, but great fun.
Is it sad when those kind of projects come to an end though? When it's kind of on market, is it a bit like, got to try and find the next one now that's of equal kind of fulfillment?
Yeah, it is. It's really like losing part of your family in some way, but at the same time, a lot of these projects are iterative, so that they'll bring out a new model and we'll start working on the next model for someone like Flightboard. So that's exciting. But as consultants, you've got to look forward, and you look to the next project as well. So when a client, there's a satisfaction in birthing a project and seeing it go out into the market. And then there's another opportunity. And again, Troy mentioned the client we do metal detectors for, and we've done probably half a dozen different projects for them. And each project is a challenge and individual, but at the same time, it's building our relationship with them for the next project, which is fantastic.
Just what I'd kind of segue a little bit, because as a lot of the people that listen to this will be from the UK. I think about 75% of our listenership's over in the UK. So Paul, if I ask you a question, so you was here for bloody ages and you went out there, what has been the main difference that you've noticed from the Aussie way to the UK way in terms of industrial design? What have you noticed that's been so different?
I've certainly noticed the biggest thing I've noticed, and I kind of did have the heads up before I left, but it's absolutely come into sort of crystal clear clarity now, and that is that an industrial designer here in Australia is a far broader individual than an industrial designer in the UK. I think industrial design in the UK is very sort of, I won't say siloed, but that's maybe a bit too harsh, but they know where they start and there's definitely a demarcation that they finish. I think here in Australia, that industrial designer, I've noticed, has got the capability and a fantastic portfolio that shows that they take it way down the line of product testing, developing, design for manufacture, material selection, the whole lot. It seems to be a much broader platform for industrial designers here. And on that point, when I was in the UK, and Brad was aware of this, we had certain clients in the UK that would tell us, please inform us the moment you get anybody coming out of Australia or New Zealand that's coming to the UK to do a 2-year or a year working holiday. Because if they're working for certain clients, I want them straight away, because I know the depth and breadth of their knowledge is just going to be a good fit within our UK consultancy. So it worked really well. But that's my observation. I don't know about Troy and Nathan, what your thoughts are.
Sorry, would you compare it to like a product design engineer over here then, Paul? Would that be how you would compare industrial designer?
Yeah, I definitely think so. But Troy and Nathan, I don't know what your views are. You might have interacted with designers from the UK. What your thoughts are?
Okay, Paul, we have a very similar viewpoint, and we deal a lot with the US, not so much the UK, but we find that siloing we find that a lot of the Australian designers have to be a lot broader, because a lot of the projects are somewhat smaller and the teams are smaller as well, we find. And so that even myself being creative director, I still find myself moving through quite a large span of the design process. So through, as Nathan was saying, the stage gate, so all the way through from system architecture and research to, initial, working with the engineers and doing design for manufacturing and helping out and, trying to solve some of the mechanical issues as well. So, and that's just because the nature, maybe the project is a bit smaller, or we do have a larger breadth of design, but I actually really enjoy that as well. And I enjoy being able to solve mechanical problems, but also, doing this front end strategy as well. But we tend to find when we go over to the States that they are astonished about the breadth and the depth of knowledge that we have as well, which is, we're not just conceptual designers, or we're not just engineers, we can sort of think laterally on a lot of different pillars, I guess.
Yeah, industrial. So I was going to say, for my knowledge, in the US, industrial design and mechanical engineering is very black and white in the US. Is that right? Yes, in me saying that?
That's what our experience would tell us. And here, as Troy's saying, it's very blurred. We have industrial designers who are really quite technical. And they're industrial design trained, but they're probably more like a product engineer in some ways. They're really clever for the aspects of design for manufacture, CAD detailing, dealing with suppliers, all of those sort of things. The flip side is that we have some product engineers who are trained engineers, but they're actually really design savvy too. So we'll often throw a design engineer into an initial concept ideation phase because we want their creative input from a mechanism perspective, or a technical materials perspective, or something like that. So I think it's probably just partly market size and the types of companies that we're dealing with, and partly just Australians' nature. We're sort of determined, inquisitive bunch, and we don't like letting go of things. So people want to stay involved in projects.
Does that mean then, if we use the UK as an example, does that mean you'd want an all-rounder that's similar in the mould, or would you actually want someone that's maybe a little bit more focused on a certain area that can complement maybe other
Yeah,
parts?
that's a good question, Brad. I would say to be dependent on the individual. So there is room in companies for specialists. There's no doubt about it. At particularly larger companies, the smaller the firm, the more likely they are to want an all-rounder, I would say. But if the company that someone's going into is large, like a Breville, for example, that would be where they'd be interested in potentially in a specialist in one area or another. For us as consultants, we love people that have got more than one string to their bow. But often people are focused in the creative end or the technical end.
In terms of the UK then, when people have been sent across, what's been your overall impression? Good? Indifferent?
Generally pretty good. We've had people from Dyson,
DCA.
people from DCA, and so they generally jumped in and were really good. Probably the thing I would say is that it's more about hitting the consultancy environment shockwave that's different than anything else. So if they're coming out of a big organisation, they're maybe not so used to the time and deliverables pressures that we have as a consultancy. So we're really racing timelines and deadlines all the time. We're running against the clock from a financial perspective as well. And there's a real pressure to punch stuff out. All of our guys are working on multiple projects at the same time that might be at different levels of the process. So you've got to be very nimble. And we probably find that some people coming out of larger organisations just need to catch up in terms of the speed more than anything.
Yeah, I think sometimes it just depends on the company, isn't it? Because you have some agencies, for example, that can be pretty rigid places to work, and then you have some large companies like, say, like a Samsung, for example, which very much has an agency kind of feel to it. But somewhere like a Dyson probably doesn't. It's very kind of those kind of stage gates you mentioned. I think you add a few more gates in for something like that. And you'll know it firsthand, Paul. You get a CV of someone. I don't know how many times I've seen the supersonic hairdryer on a portfolio, Paul. I mean, I don't know who can take responsibility for that, but I feel like everyone is. So I know sometimes it's easy to just say you can put agencies in a box and you can put in-house companies in a box. But we had a chap on. I haven't actually uploaded it yet. We had a guy called Nyssen that came on our podcast. He was at Samsung. And he spoke to us about the fact that he had to go for a meeting in Korea for 30 minutes to do a presentation. I mean, just that as a company is probably massively different to something like a Dyson, I'd imagine. But it's still
we've actually had to do exactly the same thing.
Oh, okay.
So we did a project with Samsung quite a few years ago, and it was outside of their normal design team. So they do some speculative stuff each year, some blue sky stuff. And we managed to pitch and win a project there, and literally flew to Seoul for about an hour's presentation in front of 20 people in a room. It was a classic.
Yeah. Not sure the climate appreciates that, but a cool experience.
Yeah. Cool experience. It was pretty amazing. Seoul's a great city.
Sorry, Paul, was you going to say something?
I was just kind of picking up a bit on the UK engineers opposed to Australian, and I'm just wondering, again, Troy and Nathan, what your views are on the standard of degree qualified individuals coming out of maybe the red brick universities in the UK, like Loughborough and Brunel and others. How does that, and this could be a completely separate podcast if we get onto this subject, but what's your measure of sort of the content and the level of degree caliber individuals the difference between here in Australia and those maybe that you've seen or had exposure to from the UK or other countries? What's your sort of view on university syllabuses that are fit for the industry we're in today?
In terms of the university, I guess we're often looking for people with some experience under their belt. So, you know, we're influenced pretty heavily by what their work experience is, and can probably speak more to the in general terms. We'd really like people who have not just focused on 3D CAD and 3D printing and all the contemporary sort of methodology, but also really critical thinkers. You know, they've got an ability to sketch, they've got an ability to brainstorm and work through test rigs and prototypes to get to a result. Troy talked about the user experience and sort of understanding the problem with entrepreneurs, and it's a little bit the same with young students. Is you know, we'll get to the skill level, we can see the skill level. What we want to understand is what's happening in the brain and who's thinking cleverly. Troy, I guess if you'll have something to add there for sure.
No, I was about to say the same thing, and that's that. From what we've seen, definitely coming out of the UK, there's a lot of very talented graduates from a skill set, like you're saying, from a 3D visualization, even CAD skill set. But I guess what we're looking for is that almost that storytelling and that ability for them to isolate that problem and then explore and ideate around that, and their problem solving abilities and how they communicate that in a digital format or in a PDF can be quite difficult. But you see a lot of folios, you know, you can kind of, you see that wave, but it's just finding those couple of gems and you're like, wow, you know what, that was really innovative, the way that they just looked at that problem from a different lens. And so, you know, if we can find someone that has that ability to critically think and to assess problems differently, then that's when, you know, that's when we get really excited as well. And we find that globally, just trying to find those really sort of talented.
Yeah, I've had to see, I put a job up the other day and I had like 500 applications over like a weekend. Oh. So my views on portfolios are quite skewered at the minute. So in terms of, I think they're all crap. So if you catch me on another day, you're probably going to get a very different answer from me when it comes to portfolios. But I'd imagine, going back to the question, like Aussie education system, it's still the kind of the same here, Paul, but maybe up a level a little bit in terms of the numbers or whatever. But you know, Brunel Loughborough is great. Northumbria is very good as well. But on the whole, it's pretty poor elsewhere, isn't it? But the way I've tried to look at it is that those different universities, their expectation levels are also quite different. So what they're actually trying to get out of it are different. So they're not necessarily wanting or needing people to go and work for Seymour Powell, whether they've come from like, trying to think of a bad one.
Your point, like that, the landscape's changed within tertiary education or within universities. Yeah. And so a lot of their education system is not focused towards consultancies. And so a lot of the skill sets that we're looking for, some people inherently have them, but a lot of people don't. And so, you know, the design thinking, like that kids go out and they're such broad avenues for where they can go. And so, you know, there's not as many with that traditional industrial design skill set almost.
There's quite a big digital presence in Australia as well, isn't there? Like some Canva and whatnot. There's quite a big UI UX space. Is that growing? Is that over in Oz?
It is quite big, and there's a number of, like you're saying, very large digital consultancies out there that are looking at that. And so, you know, a lot of what industrial designers or the way they're thinking do move into that digital realm as well. And, you know, because there are a lot of parallels. But
look, the other thing to think about that comes across our desk and what we've seen is that every product's got some digital input in it at the moment. You know, there's either user interfaces on the product itself and embedded into the product, or it has a companion app or a web-based interface of some sort. So part of what we're seeing over the last 5 to 8 years is that we need to be in that space. We need to be designing both physical and digital products that work together seamlessly. And so many of our projects that we get involved in are exactly that. You know, you're developing a product that looks and behaves in a certain way, and part of that is its digital presence as well. So it's really important that people as industrial designers can cross over and understand and develop products in both those spaces.
Yeah, I think it's an easy pivot for someone to make at the minute, isn't it? I think if you're an industrial designer, to move over, but also to think about it as, so sometimes when you think digital, it goes a little bit too far the other way. So it's like website design, graphics, whatever. But I suppose if you're wanting to push into digital, the niche that any good industrial designer is going to find now is that digital element to a piece of hardware. I think that's probably going to be the easiest transition for anyone to actually make into digital design. I mean, do you have like a digital UX person in your studio, or is it kind of the industrial designers just kind of, oh, okay, so you've actually...
Oh, well, they're, sorry, when I say that, they're industrial designers who are very capable in those areas. Troy is one of them, but we've got soon to be a team of 3 that amongst our 10 that are very capable digitally. So, you know, that's a crucial part of what we do, and it extends to every touch point of the product. So, you know, very quickly you're designing the instruction manual of a product, the web presence potentially of how it's visualized on the web, the branding, the packaging, as well as the digital and physical interfaces. So it's all encompassing.
Yeah. And I think you really touched on it there, Nate. It's not so much that, you know, what are those sort of widgets that we're designing? It's like, all right, what is that overall experience? And, you know, what are we trying to do, and how is that manifest? And like you're saying, Brad, a lot of the times it is a digital and physical touch point there. And, you know, we were working on a medical product that we were being asked to redesign. And after doing research, we actually found that the physical product itself wasn't the problem. It was the onboarding and the digital component that went with it. And the peripheral elements there that were actually causing the product not to be sort of used properly. And so, you know, it's, you know, it comes back to, I guess, being all round in that sense. You know, we do sort of try to, I guess, push design thinking into all of those different elements. So.
So I said, not being, I was on my phone briefly there, but I've got some guy on interview in about 20 minutes. And this is the peril of my job, Paul. You're kind of hoping that you just don't get a phone call. You know what it's like, Paul. You're just hoping that they don't call you to say they don't know where the office is, or, you know. So that's the nature of doing things at 9 o'clock in the morning. So I do apologise if anyone's watching this and thinking, why is he on his phone? Well, I just don't want anyone to call me, basically, for the next hour, because it means something's gone wrong. They never call you to say it's gone right. So
we've bored you so much that you've started just doodling on your phone instead. You know?
So
how was your first appearance on the podcast, Paul? How did you find it?
Nervous. I've been
nervous?
I've been in makeup all day, making sure I wasn't shining too much.
Good stuff. Well, look, I'm normally quite crap at kind of closing these things, but I just thought I'd say thanks for coming on, and thanks for being the first kind of guinea pigs for us. I know we had Sam over at Buzz on, so you're kind of our second set of Australian guests. It's been really interesting. I think there's lots of similarities right now between the UK and Oz in terms of industrial design. We kind of set this up as a bit of a to build that sense of kind of community. I think that's why we kind of set this up, and I think Australia is in a similar kind of way where everyone kind of knows each other, but they don't really necessarily there's not that kind of central point where people can kind of bounce ideas and stuff on. It's quite I've always found it, Paul, as people very they don't really showcase their work that much. It's quite cloak and dagger. Everyone's quite secret squirrel.
My feedback, and I am sort of very much telling my Australian candidates and clients to have a listen, and the feedback I'm getting is that they've been received really, really well. I think a lot of people have said it's very refreshing and it's a good format. And you know, in some cases it's keeping people sane because they're out doing their 88 days farm work.
Oh yeah, we had that farm guy, didn't we? That got in touch.
Woofer.
Yeah. We had some guy got in touch that's doing his I presume, is he doing his second year? Is he trying to get his second year visa?
He'd done his first year, and because there's no international travel, I think the government are quite looking favourably at those that are on a working holiday visa staying longer. So he's gone off to do his 88-day, I think it's picking blueberries or something. And he said of an evening, the only thing that was keeping him sane and realising that he was still valuing the industrial design scene was listening to the podcasts. So he thanked you for his sanity that you helped him with.
Yeah, it's been good to do it. Some guests are better than others, from my experience. I'm hoping that not all of them are going to listen to this, but some guests are better than others in terms of getting information out of that. Some have been quite guarded. I'll be honest with you. So I think it's probably one of the reasons why we went down the Aussie route, Paul, is that I don't really think they're going to be as guarded as maybe some of the
very open. Very open.
No one over here is listening, so it's okay. But no, look. All jokes aside, Brad and Paul, thanks really much, heaps for having us. Look, we really appreciate the opportunity. I have to say I've listened to quite a few episodes, and I think you're doing a great job. I love the conversational style. I love the design partners guys. Some of their insights about designing for emotion and so on was just brilliant. And I hope that we can impart some of that sort of stuff to your listeners as well, because it is about building a bit of an understanding and a bit of a community around industrial design. It's a bit of I still think my mum doesn't know what I do, and I'm 52. So, trying to expand the knowledge of our industry is one thing, and for us listening to other people from the UK who are interviewed, it's just fascinating. So we love it.
I am editing this one, so it could be an absolute disaster. So, so if you don't hear from me for a few weeks, I've probably gone on Fiverr and have paid someone 15 quid to edit it for me. So, cheers guys for coming on, and thanks to everyone that's listening. We're doing our webinar thing, and we did the first one. You may have seen it, but we did one in the UK, which is like a live Zoom call basically, and we had Roland Bowl on, who used to head up Cola, and a chap called Nick that was at IDC, which is one of the bigger agencies here in the UK. So we're doing that again at the end of the month. I've already got a couple of speakers lined up. Dan Barnes, who does this thing, I'll shout these out again. Nolii, they've sent me products. I'm just going to plug it to death. And then a chap called Jordan as well, who's a freelancer, and he's going to talk about how to freelance badly. So all these pitfalls that he's learned from freelancing, and I think that's going to be a very popular move for many as they try and find their way on the job market. But look, as I say, I'm quite crap at closing these things off. But cheers, thanks guys.
Thanks, Brad.
And
thank you, Brad.
Well done on your first appearance, Paul.
Yeah,
I'm sure I'm going to be edited completely out, and I won't be there.